Hey guys, welcome to episode 108 of The Green Life. Today's episode is delicious as we welcome Sage Dammers on. Sage is the co-founder, CEO, and product developer at Addictive Wellness. Addictive Wellness is a Californian-based company that focuses on mixing cacao, chocolate, with amazing adaptogens. Now, you guys know I love my adaptogens, so when it comes to hormones, adaptogens are everything. And also when it comes to health and supporting the adrenals, these foods are incredible. So we're going to talk about how to use them functionally in chocolate. Why not? Now, before we get into the episode, we're going to say thank you, Namawell, for the J2 juicer, which brings me the best juices every day, plus the C2, which allows you to also have a food processor. And now we can make milks with the plant milk maker. So you don't have to waste anything. There's no junk, and it's all amazing. Also, I am an affiliate of Dr. Morse's Herbs, as well as New Zest and Win the Workshop, which are really amazing brands that I take to heart because I use myself and I know they're clean, they say what they do, and they're just awesome. I also want to prompt you to check out my website for the upcoming 2025 retreats because I have the pleasure of hosting 2 of them with my friend Sky Conway, who also was on my show and will teach so much about healing. Okay guys, without further ado, let's just dive into this awesome, delicious episode with Sage. Welcome, Sage. Thank you so much for being on The Green Life, Sage. I'm really excited to have this conversation about adaptogens and your story and your journey. And you obviously have a really cool brand. And I would love to talk about everything that you created and why even you got into the space. So maybe let's start with your story. Like, why did you get interested into health foods and adaptogens in particular?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. It was a long journey to come to this place for me. I started out growing up. My parents were very health interested. I had a huge advantage in that regard. They were trying to feed us mostly organic foods. I grew up eating a vegetarian diet, but it wasn't necessarily the healthiest diet from today's perspective and the knowledge that we have available to us now. You know, it was the early 90s. The internet was not really happening. And so the access to information was not quite the same as it is these days. So it was kind of like white rice and tofu 5 nights a week and 1 night a week of pizza and 1 night a week of pasta. And that was pretty much the diet growing up. And while I didn't have any catastrophic health issues, I did always sort of feel that there was this next level of health and wellness and human performance that I wasn't quite reaching, whether it was in school, academically, or in sports. I would do pretty well. I was definitely on the higher end, but there was always this next echelon that I couldn't quite figure out how to break into. And the one thing that I knew that I was different from in everybody is that my diet was different. So I wasn't sure why I couldn't quite break through this next level, but I thought, okay, maybe they're all eating different foods from me. Maybe this is something different. And so I thought that maybe there's something dietarily. And my parents had a wellness center. So I grew up kind of in and around this idea from the Eastern world of prevention rather than waiting till you get sick and then trying to find a cure when it's already kind of too late. And I grew up with this idea of maximizing your longevity. And that's kind of a weird thing for a 14-year-old to already be thinking of is how can I live to 120? So I was already thinking the kind of thoughts that were not typical for people of my age. And as I was, I think I was around 15 when 14, 15, a gentleman from the local community came into my parents' wellness center, wanted to sell them a protein mix that he had, kind of invented, so to speak. It was hemp protein and chlorella and spirulina, some other Western herbs like milk thistle in there. And I didn't have a whole lot of examples in my life of people who had actually taken the route of proactively working on their health. Even though at my parents' wellness center, they had infrared saunas, they had infrared heated jade massage beds, they sold various different supplements and nutritional products. Everyone that I would see coming in there, they believed in this idea of taking a proactive approach to your health. But the reality was they had all waited too long. They were all in their 40s, 50s, 60s, coming in with back pain, coming in with Lyme disease, coming in with various autoimmune issues, coming with all kinds of problems. And so, even though they believed in it, they hadn't actually lived it. They had waited until they got sick, and then they were taking a more natural approach to dealing with things, which is, of
Yeah.
course, much better than the alternative. But they still weren't the example for me. So I didn't really have anybody to look towards and say, oh, he took this path. This is his outcome. Let me follow those steps. But this gentleman from the local community, he was 42, but he looked like he could have been in his late 20s. He was incredibly sharp in terms of his intelligence. It held an incredible conversation on a variety of topics. And he was absolutely jacked. And I thought, wow, this guy's got it going on. He's running his own business. He's super cool. I want to be like him. Let me find out what he's doing. Okay, he's drinking this superfood mix for 2 meals of his day. I'm going to do that. Let's see what happens. So I started doing that. And I didn't really know how to make it taste good. I was just blending this mix, and anybody who's had, hemp protein and spirulina and chlorella, they can be a little bit intense on the unique flavor side of things.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what I was doing. I was blending it with orange juice and some frozen berries and maybe a frozen banana, and it tasted like absolute dirt. And I would drink it anyways because I wanted the results. I would take a straw and stick the straw all the way to the back of my throat and just suck this thing down because I wanted the outcome. And pretty soon I started to feel this amazing high after drinking this smoothie. And it wasn't like a foggy, intoxicated high. It was, I feel incredibly clear and awake and alive. And this just blew my mind. It got me to think, if this has been out there all this time and I've been missing out, what else have I been missing out on? And this kind of shot me off down the rabbit hole of learning more about different superfoods, and then a little bit later into more traditional herbal systems of indigenous cultures. And the more I would learn, the more I would incorporate. The more I would incorporate, the better I would feel. The more excited I would get to learn more. And it just started this amazing cycle that really never stopped.
Mm.
And as I got to this concept of adaptogens, it really sparked my curiosity because I had come across some of these other Western herbs that you would take for a little while, but then you stop taking them because eventually they can maybe build up some side effects. They're not meant for long-term daily use. But then there was this school of traditional Taoist herbalism that had the idea of this elite set of herbs from around the world that you take in small amounts daily over the course of your life to build this foundation of incredible life force on which then you can construct an extraordinary life. And this just seduced my mind and spirit in a way that I saw so much potential with it in myself and when I shared it with others. So that has kind of been the abridged journey of my life.
Wow, that's really cool. Where are your parents from that they were so interested in this in wellness already at early 90s and probably from the 80s, right? What's
Right.
your background?
Yeah, so my mom grew up in Southern California. My dad originally grew up on the East Coast, but came out to Southern California for college. So they both, grew up out here. But another thing that was quite unique about their lives and then my upbringing was that they were devotees of an Indian guru named
Okay.
Guru Mai Chipalasananda. And so our home every Thursday night transformed into a meditation center when I was growing up. And there would be 50, 60 people coming over for spiritual teachings and chanting Sanskrit mantras and meditation.
Okay.
So they definitely were on a bit of a different wavelength than your average parents of the kids I went to school with.
Yeah, because it's not obviously very, mainstream, right? I think it's
Right.
pretty cool to when you were talking about the kind of things they were doing, there was a little bit of hygienist movement in there. There's a little bit of Ayurveda, like with the herbs, different herbs, and then herbalism, of course, from different kind of paths. And it's like, okay, hold on a second. So either your parents really traveled a lot and got exposed to all this, or they started following a philosophy that introduced them to that. So
Right. It was a bit of
really
both. I mean, they
cool.
spent some time in India as well. So,
Okay.
and so they picked up, of course, some things along their travels and then it's funny how the life of the child can kind of, in a way, mimic the life of the parents in some way.
Yeah.
And that, I set off on similar but different travels. And I found so much in regards to these different herbal philosophies and sources of herbs around the world.
Yeah.
It's funny how you don't realize you're copying and pasting your parents in a way, but it's hard to avoid.
Yeah, sometimes, especially if you were inspired by what they do, right?
Yeah.
Do they still have the center?
They don't. They sold it a number of years back, but they still work in the infrared sauna business now as
Yeah.
distributors for clear light saunas.
Oh, that's awesome. Very
Yeah.
nice. And okay, so how through this journey you learned a lot. You obviously looked after your own health and started putting yourself in, in the shoes of the people using these products that you were fascinated by. When did you get inspired to actually start working with certain foods? And also, you have a very big array of different adaptogens and superfoods in your and especially cacao in your repertoire. And how did you decide, okay, actually I want to create a company that it embeds all these products that I'm actually using and make something cool out of it?
Well, as I was getting into this, it was during my college years that I was really deep diving and experimenting a lot on myself. And you can only do these kinds of things for so long before you
Mhm.
eventually want to start sharing it with other people. That's unless you're some kind of psycho, you can't experience something absolutely magical and not want to at least share it with friends and family to
Yeah.
help them if you can when you see it could be useful. And the problem was that I was in college. All my friends wanted to do was drink and party, and it was the height of the opioid epidemic. So while I was thinking about astragalus and mucuna and ashwagandha, they were thinking about Percocets and all whatever other
Beer
opioids are going on,
pong.
the perks and oxys and beer pong. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like it would go well if I tried to share my passion with this at that time. But I was just kind of quietly doing my own thing. I would go to every single party. I would show up with my bottle of my cacao elixir that had cacao and mucuna and gynostema and ashwagandha in it. So I had my own little party drink. I was there having a good time. Nobody wanted to know what was in my drink, but it was. I was trying to still hang with everybody, and eventually, some friends and I were on a surf trip in Costa Rica. And I was really careful about not wanting to push anything on anybody. I didn't want to sacrifice the cool factor to be this guy pushing weird stuff on people
Hmm.
that they weren't interested in. And so I had my little NutriBullet blender, and I would be in the corner of our hostel that we were staying at, just making my superfood drinks. And they would notice that we would go out to surf, and after 2 hours, they would be ready to come in. They would want to rest and eat and drink and just chill out. Whereas I would want to stay out in the water for 4, 5, 6 hours. And the one thing they noticed that I was doing different was having these drinks. And so they started to say, hey, maybe could you make me one of those before we go back out in the water? And this is kind of secretly the moment I had been waiting for years.
Yeah.
And so I had to try to like contain my excitement and play it cool. And I made them these drinks. And I had forgotten almost that over all these years of drinking this, how bad they tasted. And I didn't realize you got them. This is not going to work. And they struggled to get it down. 2 out of the 3 of them were vomiting within a couple minutes
Oh
because
my God.
the other thing, it's not just that it tasted so bad, but they were so toxic because of everything that they were consuming. When you have a heavy toxin load in the body and you take something that is in a way powerfully detoxifying, you can get what's called a Herxheimer reaction. Some people call it a healing crisis,
Yeah.
where your body is trying to say, what the heck am I going to do with all these mobilized toxins? And they sometimes are going to go back out right the way they came in to get out of the body as fast as possible. So this is an interesting moment of realization for me, because I realized, okay, if I'm going to have any significant impact on other people, whether it's strangers or the people closest to me, beyond just feeling great myself and enjoying these things for myself, I'm going to have to figure out how to make it taste good. And I kind of set myself the vision at that point of I want to make the healthiest foods and herbs in the world taste so good that people consume them simply because it's an extraordinary food or drink experience. And it just so happens to be massively healthy as an afterthought. And I didn't know how I was going to do that at the time, but that was my goal. And I, with that goal, kind of went and experienced the next few years of my life. And I started to learn more about the benefits of cacao as a possible elite superfood, because it's the highest natural source of antioxidants, the highest natural source of magnesium, the number one mineral that people in the Western world are chronically deficient in, somewhere around 80% potentially. Very high in chromium, the number one trace mineral that around the same percentage of people are chronically deficient in. Then you get more exotic fun compounds in there, like serotonin and anandamide and phenethylamine, these different bliss chemicals. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting, because when I first saw cacao powder on the shelf at my parents' wellness center, I asked my mom, like, what's this doing here? Because my only reference for cacao, or cocoa powder, as I thought of it at the time, was Hershey's hot chocolate powder mix with the marshmallows in there that you would put in some hot soy milk when I was a kid. And I knew it not as something healthy, but like a weird little treat. And I said, this doesn't seem to fit. What are we doing with this? And I started to learn more. I was like, wow, this not only deserves to be here, but is maybe one of the best superfoods in the world with this kind of nutritional and medicinal content that it has. And this was a rare food for me, because I saw almost like a bridge going across a huge canyon. And on one side, you have foods that people traditionally consider to be good for you, but most people don't think of them as tasty or delicious and get excited about eating them. On the other side, you have foods that people traditionally consider to be delicious, but most people don't consider them to be very healthy for you. And not much spans this gap. But I saw this little bridge made of chocolate. And so that's kind of as the gateway superfood, to mix metaphors, is this is something that people crave and think of as a guilty pleasure, yet if done right, can potentially be massively beneficial. So I said, okay, well, this is great on its own, and I can start learning how to make chocolate. And I learned how to do that in Costa Rica. And then I was also realizing, okay, cacao has this bitter flavor to it. Most bitter flavors have been deemed pretty unacceptable by the Western palate. Maybe not so much in Europe, but definitely in the United States, where bitter flavors are pretty much excluded from the diet entirely. A lot of these herbs that I want to introduce people to have quite bitter flavors. The quintessential example being reishi mushroom, which the old saying is, the bitterer, the betterer. It's the active medicinal compounds in there that are so bitter. And if you get a reishi that's not very bitter, it's not very good. So I had to think, okay, how am I going to introduce these to people? Well, I realized you can camouflage a lot of these bitter herbal flavors behind the, for some reason, accepted bitter flavor of cacao. And it goes in really nicely. People don't seem to mind. And so I said, okay, this is not only going to be the gateway superfood, how I share this with people, but also the Trojan horse of how I sneak in all these herbs that people may never have been willing to touch otherwise.
Yeah, very clever. So you don't only have powders, you have the blends, but you also make chocolate. Yeah, you actually
Correct.
chocolate bars,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, we do actual chocolates. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the brand also. That's actually with the branding. I like to understand why you created the branding, why there's a horse on it. Is that because of the Trojan horse bringing stuff in?
That's so funny. I never actually thought about it like that. No, it's
really?
not. It's not, but that's so funny. But
Maybe
it's
subconsciously.
actually, so if you look closer, it's actually a unicorn. And
Okay.
so we had a totally different vision in mind for our packaging when my girlfriend and I were first starting to kind of put a business plan together for our company. And we were taking a day off amongst all the business planning and going on a bike ride through Venice Beach. And we ran into a friend of ours, Trek is his name, a really extraordinary, ultra creative, one of a kind guy. And we were talking to him about what we were up to and how we had in mind this vision for the brand that was going to be more dark luxury elegance, maybe like the black, gold, bronze kind of concept, maybe in the direction of a Godiva kind of an idea and feeling. And he says, wow, I really don't see that for you guys. I was thinking you would do something more like white and gold, maybe with a unicorn as a symbol of longevity and purity to reflect what your products are trying to deliver to people. And we started thinking, like, actually, that feels pretty great. And as we researched more about the symbolism of the unicorn, it felt really good. And something we didn't realize is that the horn of the unicorn, mythologically, was said to be made of a substance called alicorn. And alicorn had the magical property to it that it could detect poisons and turn them into healing elixirs, which blew our minds to read that, because this is exactly what we were trying to do. We wanted to take all the things that people traditionally considered to be bad for you, and but delicious, and turn them into the healthiest possible thing.
That is awesome. Brilliant. When did you start the company?
10 years ago. So right at the end of 2014. So end of November will be 10 years.
Okay, take me through the journey. So take me through you doing the business plan, you starting the business. Now you have to think about what products you're going to have, because I think people really take it for granted that when you have a product company, it's not just big bang, you do everything at once. You have to come up with recipes, you have to test, you have to find the suppliers, you have to do so many things to make sure that you have the quality that you want for a product. And so it takes a bit of development to do that. So when you started, what was the first thing that you worked on? What was the first range you had, and how did you decide to develop more? And how did you also decide into creating the different mix and matches of the superfoods that you have?
We started with chocolate because I figured that is the easiest thing to get people excited about. You don't have to explain to them how to consume it. When you sell different powders, people are saying, how do I use this? How do I use this? And some people might not even touch it because they don't want to ask. They'll just, stay away from it because they don't know what to do with it. Whereas chocolate, you don't have to tell anybody what to do. They know exactly where to put it. They know how to chew it. They know, it's pretty self-explanatory. And so through my travels over the many years before that, and through growing up in and around the health world, on the side of the sourcing, I pretty much had that for the most part figured out, for all the different ingredients that we wanted to use. Incredible wild grown mycotoxin-free cacao coming from Ecuador, the greatest adaptogens coming mostly from China and India, where they're traditionally from, but also a little bit from Siberia, for example, with chaga mushroom. And so that was already kind of in place. And the first three chocolates that we decided to start with, I had a lot of ideas in mind, so it was hard to figure out where to start. But we started with beauty, energy, and tranquility. And we decided we're going to do these as functional chocolates rather than flavor-based chocolates, because while it's fun to do different chocolate flavors, like you could do a ginger, a peppermint, a cayenne, you could go in so many directions. You could have one with almonds, infinite possibilities, right? But let's say you have three chocolates in terms of your functions, but then you want to do three different flavors. Well, I thought, shoot, what if I do a mint chocolate for the tranquility, but somebody wants to relax and they don't like mint, and now they're out from that chocolate. So if I'm doing three flavors and three functions, now I need 9 chocolates to have every flavor and every function combination. If that grows to, I want to have 6 functions and 6 flavors, now I need 36 chocolates. So I said, okay, let's hold off on the flavor craziness. Let's enjoy the beautiful flavor that is cacao, and then combine that with different herbal formulations of these adaptogenic herbs in each one. So people can not just think about, oh, I want this flavor, I want that flavor, which we're very accustomed to doing in the Western world, but instead tap into a little bit of body awareness and say, what do I need right now? Functionally, do I need to be a little bit more peaceful? Do I need to improve my energy production? Do I want to make my skin glow a little more? Or later, from that, we did this for a year. We had those 3 chocolates in our line, and then and this is all started on really a minimal budget. And then we did a Kickstarter the next year, and we used that funding to continue the runway, essentially, for the takeoff of our business, and to come out with our next 3 chocolates. And the next 3 that we did were Love, which was focused on romantic experience, of course, and then Focus for mental cognitive optimization. And then the last one was, first we didn't know what to call it. First we called it She, then we called it Femininity. It was all focused around women's hormones. That one, unfortunately, we no longer have in our line because that was the one chocolate that we never were able to make people understand.
Oh, wow.
We tried, it only took off to a fraction of the sales of anything else that we did, which
what
I was
was
really
in it?
sad to see.
What was in
So
it?
this was, it was ashwagandha, shatavari, gelatinized maca, and white peony. And people who did take it had amazing experiences with it. The testimonials were spectacular, and we may bring it back one day, and give it another shot.
I think it's a good time now because people are finally talking about female hormones a lot more.
Right. Yeah, I
And
think we
you
were
might
maybe a
find-
little too
yeah.
early.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe it will be a 2025 thing for us to make a comeback there.
Yeah.
And so we ended up sometime later replacing that, and we had one called Recharge, which is something that would achieve a lot of similar outcomes, but could be applicable to both men and women. And this is focused on what's called the Jing in the Taoist system, which is your core, kidney, adrenal reserve energy.
Yeah.
And so that became very popular. And then we expanded later on to also include one for immunity. We came out in 2020. It's like, okay, we need to have an immunity chocolate. The time is right. We've been playing around with the idea for a while. Then everybody's going crazy. Okay, let's do it. And then we came out also with one called Pure, because while these adaptogens are amazing for the vast majority of people, when you're pregnant or breastfeeding, because there's not enough modern scientific research, even though quite a few of these have traditional use during those times, it's best to err on the side of caution because it's such a sensitive time. So we wanted to have a chocolate that incorporated this mycotoxin-free cacao that was sugar-free, that women could enjoy during these times when they temporarily would have to take it easy on the adaptogen side.
Yeah, it's a smart move. How do you sweeten your chocolates?
It's a combination of allulose and monk fruit.
Okay, nice. So it doesn't have any refined sugars, which I didn't expect you to have, but of course. Okay, and when did you start bringing the powders in?
So we did that 2 years into the company. We had this plan from the beginning. There's actually, in my original idea and in our business plan, we had 4 product lines. 2 of them have come to fruition, and the other 2, one more information became available that caused it to drift out, and the other one we'll get to one day. But the other 2 were that I wanted to look at maybe doing certain wines from special areas in the world that were the highest resveratrol wines in the world, and doing like a marketing where they would each have a certain level of resveratrol tested on the label so you knew exactly what you were getting. Maybe we'll come back to that one. The other idea was herbal vaporizers, like e-cigarettes, but no nicotine, just herbal extracts in them. And those were spectacularly effective. Actually, we did some prototyping, but the issue is that in a lot of these devices, not some of the higher end ones, but in a lot of them, you get microparticles of silica and heavy metals coming in from some of the cheaper devices. So we let that one go. There's enough other ways to get herbs into the system.
Yeah, totally. It must be quite a creative process to think about what products are we going to bring in that is not really common, it's not done like everywhere. So it must be quite interesting and creative. That's fun. In terms of sales and selling, I want to talk about the adaptogenic in particular, but as we're talking about business, in terms of selling, do you sell directly through your website only, or are you also stocked in places like Whole Foods?
We sell through our website, of course, and we sell on Amazon. We have a lot of retailers across the U.S. that sell our products. We're not at the level to be in the kind of big box retailers like Whole Foods yet, but many retailers across the country. And if there's not one in your area, we'll ship to you very fast, and we ship around the world pretty much.
Okay.
There's a few countries like your country of Portugal, which is unfortunately very hard to get chocolate shipments into. The 3 that we have not been able to get into, sadly, are Portugal, Spain, and Mexico.
Interesting.
Their import requirements are very intense. Sometimes people can use a forwarding address in another country. Like I know some people in Portugal will use a forwarding address in Luxembourg, and they'll just forward the package along to them because it's coming from within Europe at that point, no problem. But they don't like taking chocolate from America for some reason.
I mean, I've ordered products from the US. It's just that by the time you pay the customs, it's insane.
Right. It's astronomical, right?
Yeah, it's astronomical. It's not they charge you not only for 23% tax, but also they charge you for how long they hold the package for, even if it's, their system that is slow, right? So by the time you get a product that comes from the US, you're paying almost double what it costed you. So it's really
It's almost worth like a once-a-year trip to the US just to load up your suitcase.
Honestly, yes. Or paying a bucket load of money to get, for example, DHL to do all the paperwork before they ship here. So there's a iHerbs has sorted that out, for example.
They're great. So, they're great, especially throughout Europe. They're fantastic.
Yeah, so they come from the US. The products come from the US, but because they do all the paperwork, you pay actually not too much because obviously they have deals. So you end up only paying the 23%, and they manage everything else, which I think is actually quite good but there are limitations as to what you can bring in. I think food is not one of the things you can actually import. So it's interesting, but okay, let's go talk about the adaptogenic side of things. So We mentioned this word a lot of times, and we also mentioned superfoods. Now, superfoods, of course, is not a scientific word; it's a very marketing field word. But
Yeah, and I apologize for overusing it. It has kind of lost its meaning in recent
no,
years
but
and
I
been
know what you
diluted. But
mean, and I look at all plants as superfoods, so it's not a
yeah,
problem. But adaptogens are actually in the scientific literature called adaptogenics. So if people don't know what that means, if they're new to this world of wellness, what is an adaptogen?
so you have various classes of herbs, as the Taoists would see it. You have the inferior herbs, which are reserved for your enemies in the sense of the most inferior herbs, which are poisons. You don't give those to anybody that you like. Then
Yeah.
the next level up from that are the medicinal herbs. These are herbs you would take for a short period of time for some medicinal value to treat a particular disease or ailment, but then you would stop taking them because long term they could have some negative side effects or take your health in a direction that you don't want to go. Then there is the elite class of tonic herbs, which were all required to be adaptogenic by nature. These are herbs, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that you're intended to take in small amounts daily over the course of your life to, to build this foundation of radiant life force and to build what they call the three treasures. So they had this philosophy of looking at health as a three treasure system. And I'll quickly explain this and then we can get back to the adaptogens. But this gives such a nice structure to understand the different adaptogens and what they do. So you have the initial treasure is the jing, and they use the metaphor of a candle. I like to use the metaphor of some financial things. So I'll explain both. So the jing is the wax and the wick of the candle. It's its basic form. I say the jing is like a trust fund and a savings account. So you inherit a certain amount of jing from your parents, depending
Mm.
on how their nutrition was, how they lived, how their parents before them lived. It goes back many generations in terms of how healthy your ancestors were. And so you inherit a certain amount. That's you're getting a bit of a trust fund in. Some people come in with a big fat trust fund. Some people don't get much. And so you get what you get. Can't do much about it at that point. But you can become a really great financial manager as you go through life and learn how to make the most of what you've got and build upon it. So
Yeah.
that's what's called your prenatal jing is what you inherit. Then you have your postnatal jing. And so this is something that you'll use up this jing really fast if you're partying, if you're doing drugs, if you're not sleeping well, if you're stressing all the time. And you can build this jing back up through certain yoga practices. You can build it up through, I think, through really great sleep. You can build it up through use of certain jing building herbs, things like Hoshu Wu, Eucomia, cordyceps, cistanche, morinda, rehmannia. These are some of the elite Jing tonics. And then you have your savings account of energy. So you want to not be drawing out of your savings account more than you're depositing. That's the key because eventually you run out of Jing and that's the end of this life. And so you want to be building this up and maintaining it as much as you can and not depleting it through various forms of excessive living and disrespecting your health and living unsustainably. Then the second treasure is the flame of the candle. It's the active part, or it's your checking account, active part of your finances. This is where you're getting your daily deposits and withdrawals. This is called your chi. And so you want to be living out of your checking account, right? You don't want to be dipping into your savings. And so if you're generating enough income, if you're generating enough energy through the air you breathe, the food you eat, maybe various yoga practices, maybe various herbal compounds, if you're generating enough on a daily basis, you don't have to dip into those reserves. And so herbs that can be supportive here are things like cordyceps, astragalus. These are even you could dip into the Ayurvedic system and look at ashwagandha, which is a prana tonic, which is effectively the equivalent of qi in many ways. And so that's the active part. But then you say, okay, well, that's great. And what's the third treasure? The third treasure is the ultimate purpose of the candle. You don't have a candle just to have a bright flame. You have a candle to give off a great light. So this is your higher self. It's the light in your eyes. It's your spirit. It's your ability to have a beautiful and beneficial impact on the world around you. If we think about the metaphor of the financial system, you don't want to just have a big savings account and a big checking account. What are you going to do if you have those sorted out? You're going to start a nonprofit. You're going to have a charity to benefit your community. And so that's what this is. And you can't have a very successful charity if your personal finances are in total disarray. You can't give off a great light if you're just a little birthday candle. So you start by building the jing, then you build the qi, and then you build the shen, this third ultimate treasure. And so you have shen tonic herbs, things like reishi and schizandra and albizia flower. And so these various adaptogens are dual directional in their nature, in the sense that when they come into your body, they have not pre-decided the final outcome of what's going to happen. They're interacting with your biology, and they are improving your body's own self-regulatory mechanisms. And so if you are, say, too stressed, reishi mushroom or gynostema or ashwagandha is going to help you feel more peaceful. Yet at the same time, if you are low on energy, it's going to help your natural energy production. So you're going to feel a little bit more invigorated. You could take it in the morning. You could take it before you go to sleep, and it's going to help you with what your body needs. And then similarly, if you are trying to lose weight, gynostema is a great herb for optimizing your metabolism. If you're trying to put on some muscle, gynostema, also a really great herb. So these can work in a great way to optimize your body from whatever starting point you may be at.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. I think that makes people probably understand that it's something that supports your body, like of what, depending on what you need. So an adaptogenic herb is a smart herb. It's like the smartphone of nature, knows what to do.
Exactly. It's reactive instead of being something that, okay, it's just going to come in and stimulate your immune system. Like there's many things you could do to do that. Like let's say you're getting sick. Okay, you want to get on echinacea, right? To like fire up that immune system. But you don't want your immune system to be overactive all the time. You don't want to go into a level of autoimmunity. That's a whole another host of problems that you don't want to deal with. Something like reishi mushroom, it improves the natural intelligence of the immune system to where if it's underactive, it's going to bring it up. If it's overactive, it's going to wind it back down. And there was an amazing study done earlier this year that looked at women between 60 and 80 years old and taking 2 grams of reishi extract per day. And it found exactly this, that the immune system activity was brought down, inflammation was brought down in cases where immune system activity and inflammation were high, yet where it was underactive, it was brought up. And so it's not just something that is the traditional theory, but also more and more every year we see more studies coming out confirming that this is in fact reality.
Yeah. And I mean, for example, ashwagandha is one of the most studied herbs, for example. It's really good to know that, because yesterday I interviewed Dr. Joel Furman. I love him. It's great. Yeah, he's great, and he really, understands nutrition in such a such a brilliant way. Yeah. Okay, but he hates herbs. I did not expect that response because I never heard him talk about it. But oh my gosh. So that was interesting, and I was like, okay. But I think there is definitely a benefit. I understand where he's coming from and what he's saying about the toxicity of some of them, and you mentioned it too. There are some herbs that you can take for a little bit of time, but they're not meant to be taken for a long time. But I think when we get into the herbs that are more elevated, we're also talking about herbs that actually are food status, like turmeric, like it's a food after all, and ashwagandha really is a food. Maca is a food, So
right, they've been incorporated into basically dietary systems because though they could be classified as herbs, they are so gentle and non-toxic in their activity that they can be treated like food. Yeah.
So I think maybe that's what he meant, but that was an interesting reaction. So and it's very funny that obviously this episode comes right after his, because I think it's a different conversation about what we think about herbs. And as I studied to become a naturopathic doctor, herbs are part of my, toolkit. And I think perhaps one of the things that I understand, like, we don't want to use herbs like we do medicine, because otherwise we are trying to just get rid of symptoms. But the way I look at herbs, and anyway, things like we're talking about here, the medicinal mushrooms, and we're talking about the maca, the ashwagandha, I see them as supportive to the body, not actually into the organs, not really focusing on taking away any symptoms, right? They don't work on ailments, they work on the system. Yeah, upstream, exactly. So I think maybe that's the difference in the conversation that we should have when we talk about herbs, because I feel there are lots of people that think about herbs as we do drugs. Okay, I have a headache. What do I take for a headache, right?
but it's like, actually, no, why do you have a headache? Okay, maybe there's not enough circulation. Maybe you're not hydrated. So like, what can you do to do these things? Maybe you have to detox a little bit. How do you stimulate detoxification in your liver? And we can go into little, plants like that are also considered herbs, like um I don't know, milk thistle. I mean, yesterday I mentioned milk thistle, but Dr. Perman didn't think there was enough science. But I've seen the benefit of it. And I mean, I don't know if it's placebo, but I felt good when I took
Sure.
it for a little while. So I don't know. There is just things that we have to think about, right? Um, okay, so how do you actually? This is a good question that we can segue into, because I experienced this a lot with the medical system. Unless a doctor is educated in and believes that there are alternatives from nature that can support the body, when we talk about herbs, we are met with a big frown and be like, yeah, this is BS. Although pharmaceuticals come from plants, they just
Right.
have other additives to them. So it's like, but so how do you deal with the naysayers, with the like, yeah, whatever, chocolate, with adaptogens?
Well, I don't try to convert people who can't be converted. There's
Mm,
enough people out there for me that I would say I just focus on the people who have an open mind to it, who are interested in this. And there's enough people I feel like that I can continue to share that message with, who are interested and open to this path and this idea, that it's not the best use of time to try to convert people who are never going to be converted. You don't try to sell to somebody who's never going to buy. But that said, sometimes I will end up just in social situations,
yeah,
in a group conversation with somebody who's just not into these things, and I try to approach it as gently as I can. I point towards some of the research. Sometimes they say, oh, that's not enough, or I don't know, I haven't seen that. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. We agree to disagree, and that's perfectly okay. Whether it's with herbalism or with different dietary approaches, there's going to be different people who take different routes to it. And I think even though that person and I might not agree on that specific thing, like maybe we don't agree on that about taking adaptogenic herbs and their potency and efficacy, or maybe we don't agree on the best diet, but we probably agree on most things. We could probably find a whole host of things. So I try to find as much as I can common ground instead of going directly and focusing on the point of disagreement. And I find often that if you establish as much common ground as you can first before jumping into the point of disagreement, they might be a little more open when you get to that point of disagreement. Or maybe, like, let's say in a conversation, initially you meet each other at a point of disagreement, you can back down, find 5 to 10 minutes of common ground, gently circle back around to the thing, and maybe you're both a little bit more open to each other's perspective.
that's true, especially if you're men, because apparently with your testosterone spikes, you're more open-minded after 15 minutes. That's a joke. But maybe not a joke,
But
really.
yeah, it's rooted in reality.
Yeah,
I would say.
it is. Okay. That's a very good answer. And, I think we need to be able to have these difficult conversations in a way that is constructive. And hopefully we all learn something that we didn't know. But it does become a little bit heated sometimes, like when people are just not interested in learning. But as you said, then you don't engage because there is no point. So you
Yeah,
have to
there's enough
read.
other things to talk to them about.
No, you have to read the audience.
Right.
And in terms of growing now with your company, what are your next steps? What are you trying to do? What do you think? What do you want to do that can change the landscape of the health business through your products?
I think the world of health is really reaching a level that it's never seen before in terms of the amount of people who have awareness of the natural health world, and the various solutions and options available to build incredible levels of health. For all the negatives that social media has brought us, I think it's also brought a channel for positive information that
That's true.
that people can take in, that can actually be very beneficial for them, and they can become aware of some things and then go and further research them and learn more about them, or come to a podcast like this and take a deeper dive into certain topics. So I'm excited that the audience for these products is growing. Back 10 years ago, we were a little ahead of our time, I would say, with the kind of products that we were bringing to market. And I think we're seeing just an explosion in the amount of people who are taking more of an interest in natural health approaches, to say the least. And I think it's happening out of necessity because it's harder and harder to get away with paying zero attention to your health, whether it's because of viruses or just because of the amount of toxins in the conventional food supply or the lack of real health impact of most pharmaceutical solutions. People can't get away anymore with just going with the flow into a bowl of Fruit Loops in the morning and pharmaceuticals for lunch. It's just not a path that has long-term sustainability. So people are having to look elsewhere because their health is suffering so much. And as more and more people are having this awakening, we are here to greet them with chocolate. So I'm excited that our potential customer base in this sense is rapidly expanding. And not just because, oh, we're going to make more money, but I get so excited to see people have this transformation to a whole different level of well-being that they had either never even known was possible or maybe had last experience as a small child before they used up a lot of their jing and depleted themselves and kind of almost forgot existed.
So true. I like that. Thank you. How can people get hold of you? How can they follow you? How can they follow your company? We'll put everything in the show notes, but the easiest way to chat to you, you're a fountain of knowledge when it comes to this. So it's nice for them to learn how to use, and I think that's very important, how to use the chocolate in a way that is respectfully sacred, because it is a beautiful fruit and it has a lot of spiritual meaning as well. And I'm sure you know, going into the heart center.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it'd be nice for people to actually use it mindfully rather than, you know, there's a difference between the chocolate you're talking about and you mentioned Hershey's,
Right.
and that stuff that is candies. So how do people learn from you? How they can get in touch with you and pick up a conversation directly?
So as you can probably tell, I get really excited talking about these topics, sometimes maybe a little too excited. And so we have all social media channels, whether it's YouTube. You can search Addictive Wellness on Addictive Wellness is the name of the company on YouTube. You can search Addictive Wellness on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And we put out lots of educational video content about cacao, about nutrition, about supplementation, adaptogenic herbs, because it puts a big smile on my face just getting into these topics. And so you can find us on any of those platforms, reach out to us. You can go on our website, addictivewellness.com, and check out some of our products. As you mentioned, our cacao is meant to be consumed as something with deep meaning, something with great heart opening potential, something far more than just a food. You know, this isn't cacao that's grown on a plantation. This is not grown on a farm. It's not monocropped. This is wild harvested from very select regions in Ecuador, where it has not been planted by a person. It's wild grown. It's been in the soil there for 40 to 60 years. And these beans produce something quite different. It's because of these beans that the cacao has a genetic robustness to fight off mold and be mycotoxin free, which is extremely rare in the cacao world. And it has just a wider flavor profile than something that would be just coming from a monocropped plantation. So, you know, we could have a whole another hour talking about the intricacies of cacao, but it's just another thing that I get really passionate about sharing with people. So I would love for anyone to experience it.
Brilliant. I actually have one last question before we close, and it's about you. You mentioned how the cacao is grown. Could you consider your cacao to be ceremonial grade?
We can't, technically. There is various considerations and definitions of what is considered ceremonial grade cacao. One part is that it has to be roasted. Ours is not roasted. We use a raw cacao. Most raw cacaos are not going to have this flavor that ours does because they're coming from plantation cacao. This one has a very roasted-like flavor, that full flavor body. But because it's not roasted, some people would disqualify it from being ceremonial. And then the other part of ceremonial is harvested with love, processed with love. I think we have that very much going on. But because it's not roasted, technically no.
Okay, interesting. I thought that raw cacao was part of the ceremonial. That was my bad. And
no worries, no worries.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
But
had
you can certainly have a ceremonial relationship with this cacao, in my
yeah,
opinion,
and
have
that's the thing,
a
right?
transcendental experience with it. Yeah.
Yes. Brilliant. Okay, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Sage, for and your name actually it's very interesting because you are very wise, and Sage would aim to
Oh,
that
thank you.
kind of.
It's
And
I picked it when I was 5 years old, and I figure it's something that I can try to grow into over the course of my life.
Oh wow! So what is your birth name, if we can?
So I was Jonathan when I was born.
Okay.
And when I was 5 years old, I was in a department store with my mom, and I got lost amongst these aisles of shoes, and I got like, I was 5 years old. I got like scared, confused, and I heard somebody else yelling, Jonathan, Jonathan, and it was some other mom yelling at her son, Jonathan, and I was just like, what is going on? I'm lost. And that day, eventually I found my mom, and on the car ride home, I said, there's too many people with the name Jonathan. I want to pick a more unique name. And she said, okay, well, what do you want to be? I said, I know, I have to think about it. And this was during the summertime, and I kind of had narrowed it down to a few choices eventually. And my final two selections was, and you have to keep in mind, I was really into Native American culture at that time. Yes. So this influenced me a lot. And so my two choices were either Sage or Moonwalker. And it was the first day going to kindergarten. And my mom says, well, you got to pick which it's going to be because they got to call you something. And so there was my mom kind of had a feeling that Moonwalker was not going to be the best for me.
Yeah,
and that
for children
Sage would
interaction.
be a little bit easier socially, right? So she was real smart. She had a tissue box in the car and a pen, and she handed it to me, the tissue box and the pen, and turned the tissue box over and says, well, try writing them, see which you like the look of better. And because I was leaning very much towards Moonwalker, but the problem is it was too long for me to spell. I couldn't spell it. And so I'm Sage.
That is awesome. That's the best story I heard. Thank you so much. And you picked the right name. There you go. You picked the right name.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sage. And I really am, I'm really grateful we made the time. And we definitely can do it again. We can talk about the nuances of cacao and even the particles that make cacao very special. I mean, we can have an episode on chocolate. I think nobody will mind. So
I would love that too.
Yeah, we can do that. So yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sage, and thank you everyone for staying on to the podcast. I'm so excited about this conversation, and I hope that if you don't know about Addictive Wellness, you can check them out, learn more about the products and the flavors, and if you have your favorite, share it with us. Also, guys, as always, I want to prompt you please to check out the review sections in any platform you're listening this on, because it really helps us grow, and the more listeners, the more we can invite bigger and bigger and bigger guests. So I send you love, and I'll see you next week. Bye.